Distraction from action. I grew up in a manufacturing town, a company town, heavily influenced by Caterpillar Tractor Company. I still get excited when I see big yellow earth-moving equipment. I grew up with big yellow earth-moving equipment meaning money, and money meaning happiness. That happiness was associated with distractions. Those distractions included vacations, shiny cars, and houses with accommodation for entertainment centers and space for more and more expensive food and alcohol. In that manufacturing town, I was encouraged to hire on with that big yellow earth-moving equipment manufacturer right after high school if possible, so I could collect things, retire young, and move to Florida. I decided not to do that, but I didn't realize that I did the same thing in a sense. I just went after different distractions. Distractions involving collecting job titles and higher salaries. I thought I had dodged a bullet, but in fact, I had gone down the same path and wound up doing exactly what I had tried to escape. I wound up buying things and focusing on immediate gratification. We live in a society that sells us this bill of goods. We are told that this is the path to happiness. The path is to work hard for these things so that we can afford greater distractions. The distractions seem to be distractions from the spiritual and moral sacrifices we are making in order to do these things, and distraction from that feeling that there is something missing. I had that feeling that my life was passing while I was checking all the boxes. I had degrees, I had job titles, I had a career path, I had investments, a house, a couple of cars, an entertainment center, and I went on regular vacations to places known for their focus on helping with escape and distraction. So what is the action from which I was distracting myself? As best I can tell, the action we humans seem to be meant for is growth. Growth in multiple areas. Initially, it seems to be physical growth, then intellectual growth, then spiritual growth, and of course some of those overlap. So this seems to be the action that I should be taking. The distraction I'm referring to is everything and anything which is not contributing to this action. The distraction is the stuff that makes it easy to avoid this action. The distraction makes it very easy to avoid thinking about taking this action. I often find myself referring to my own getting caught up in distraction as a form of selling my soul. There was a time when I would hear the phrase, selling one's soul, and I imagined big stuff. Certainly, there would be a ceremony and a ritual involving large amounts of sound and vision, and a formal signing ceremony with an ornate fountain pen. And the fountain pen would be made of precious metals and decorated with jewels, and it would be filled from a well of blood, not from an inkwell. But that is not the way that it happened for me. It happened slowly, and it was accompanied with quiet praise for each soul-sucking action I took. We are encouraged to engage in distractions and immediate gratification to reach goals that we associate with happiness, freedom, and belonging and intimacy. We put value in that distraction, and we will pay with time off our lives for that distraction. Therefore, there's a market for that distraction. Marketing techniques are used to take advantage of our desire for distraction. Marketing techniques associate those distractions with fundamental human needs and sell them to generate money for others to finance their distractions. The following are some examples. These are taken from some of the most effective marketing and advertising campaigns in American history. The first one, Lucky Strike, Torch of Freedom. The Lucky Strike Torch of Freedom campaign was a campaign to get women to smoke. With the distraction of smoking and, of course, the very temporary lift that nicotine gives us, we were not so subtly led to believe that the act of smoking is, in and of itself, an act of female defiance of the cultural restrictions on the behavior of women. Lucky Strike, Torches of Freedom. The next one. The Woodbury Soap Company, Skin You Love to Touch. An oldie but a goodie. This campaign from 1911 has the distinction of being one of the first mass media campaigns to blatantly employ sex for the purpose of advertising. Woodbury used drawings and photos of nude models in its ads, accompanied by the slogan, "Skin You Love to Touch." The slogan became so popular that Woodbury kept using it well into the 1940s. Woodbury soap contributed considerably to one of the most important lessons in marketing: sex sells. We look for intimacy. We associate this intimacy with sex, so sex sells, and it distracts us from the hard work of building true intimacy. Another one. De Beers, A Diamond is Forever. When we think of marriage, chances are that rings come to mind, and often diamond rings are depicted in wedding proposals, in movies, and in all forms of advertising. Many of us don't realize, I didn't realize, that rings have not been part of the traditional engagement and wedding tradition for very long at all, and that rings were introduced by a jewelry company. In 1948, the De Beers Diamond Company was facing decreasing sales because of the effects of the Great Depression. To increase the sales of diamond rings, they came up with advertising campaigns that pushed the idea that engagement and marriage are best sealed with a diamond ring because that ring signifies lasting commitment. Wouldn't it logically follow then that the size and quality of the diamond would indicate the depth and sincerity of the proposal and of the commitment to a lifetime of dedication to a marriage? Makes sense, right? Quite a distraction from development of the interpersonal skills needed to create the intimacy, commitment, and dedication needed for a marriage that will last a lifetime. A diamond is forever is still the company's official slogan. Marlboro cigarettes, the Marlboro Man. The Marlboro Man is the ultimate representation of the rugged, free-spirited, hyper-masculine male gender identity. The Marlboro Man was a means of popularizing filtered cigarettes among those who sought that gender identity. With the distraction of smoking and the mood elevation provided by the nicotine, we are led to believe that the act of smoking this brand is an act of rugged, free-spirited masculinity. This effectively distracts us from deeper ponderings on masculinity and on gender. The campaign worked exceptionally well. Marlboro became the world's top-selling brand of cigarettes in 1972. Another one, Dos Equis. Most interesting man in the world. The Dos Equis line of beer commercials has become a classic of the internet age. The campaign was based around the larger-than-life exploits of a worldly gentleman. No doubt the reduced inhibitions associated with alcohol consumption provides enough distraction for us to draw the conclusion that larger-than-life exploits result from consumption of this brand of alcohol. I don't think many of us have found that to be true with any brand of alcohol. Old Spice, the man your man could smell like. This campaign presents that an aftershave or deodorant is what distinguishes that good man, and it implies that having the distraction of that smell is significant whether the man is that man or not. Old Spice did this with videos that did not seem concerned with making sense, but provided the distraction of being entertaining to watch and easy to remember. So, given these examples of how we are bombarded with distractions, how do we spend our time? The 2018 U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics reported the following. Work time. Full-time employees averaged 8.5 hours when they worked on weekdays and 5.4 hours when they worked on weekend days. That was work. Now, maintenance of our personal things. On the days we did household activities, we averaged 2.3 hours doing those activities, taking care of our things. Watching TV, the leisure activity that occupied the most time. Americans averaged 2.8 hours per day. Socializing and communicating, such as visiting with friends or attending or hosting social events, accounted for an average of 38 minutes per day. Time spent reading for personal development varied greatly by age. Individuals aged 75 and over averaged 48 minutes of reading per day, whereas individuals 15 to 54 read for personal development on the average of 10 minutes per day. We stay busy. But what about spiritual growth-related activities? What are these activities? I've noticed something about our Unitarian Universalist sources. You know, the ones listed right up front in our hymnal. I was delightfully surprised to find that the information listed in the Unitarian Universalist sources actually provides guidance on where we may want to consider putting our focus to engage in actions to promote spiritual growth in ourselves and in the world. When we originally encounter these sources, it would seem as though they are just telling our history and how we developed into a denomination. On a closer look at these actions, we can see that they not only tell us where we have found our sources of inspiration, but within the description, they identify the actions that we need to be taking for spiritual growth. Within this information, we find guidance on what actions we can take to maintain and enhance our spiritual growth. I was a Unitarian for quite a while before I noticed that. These are the very actions from which we are distracting ourselves. These are the actions needed to avoid becoming stagnant from all our distractions and the markets created from them. Now, as stated in the front of our hymnal, Unitarian Universalist congregations affirm and promote 7 principles which we hold as strong values and moral guides. We live out these principles within a living tradition of wisdom and spirituality, drawn from sources as diverse as science, poetry, scripture, and personal experience. These are the 6 sources our congregations affirm and promote. First source listed: direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder affirmed in all cultures, which moves us to a renewal of the spirit and an openness to the forces that create and uphold life. This source encourages us to engage with things that move us to renewal of the spirit and an openness to the forces which create and uphold life. The next source: words and deeds of prophetic people which challenge us to confront powers and structures of evil with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love. This source encourages us to take actions that challenge us to confront powers and structures of evil, and to confront them with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love. The next source on the list: wisdom from the world's religions, which inspires us in our ethical and spiritual life. This points us to engage with that which inspires us in our ethical and spiritual life. The next source: Jewish and Christian teachings which call us to respond to God's love by loving our neighbors as ourselves. This source points us to act, to pursue a deeper way of experiencing love by loving our neighbors as ourselves. The next source on the list: humanist teachings which counsel us to heed the guidance of reason and the results of science, and warn us against idolatries of the mind and spirit. This points us to act on the guidance of reason and the results of science, and to avoid idolatries of the mind and spirit. The final source on the list: spiritual teachings of earth-centered traditions which celebrate the sacred circle of life and instruct us to live in harmony with the rhythms of nature. This points us to celebrate the sacred circle of life and to actually live in harmony with the rhythms of nature. And that's all right there in the front of our gray hymnal. And I think that's good news. This tells me that even if we have become distracted from action, we can positively affect our lives, our communities, and the planet by turning to the actions clearly listed in our Unitarian Universalist sources. Six sources, just six. We can make a difference by turning our focus to renewal of the spirit and openness to the forces which create and uphold life. We can find ways to confront powers and structures of evil with justice, compassion, and love. We can engage with that which inspires us in our ethical and spiritual life. We can actively pursue efforts to love our neighbors as ourselves, and we can heed the guidance of reason and the results of science, and we can begin today to celebrate the sacred circle of life. And those are the actions we can take for spiritual growth.